when you shop for summer clothes. Think pink, pink, pink if you want that kelp that shows. Red is dead, blue is through, green's obscene, brown's taboo, and there is not the slightest excuse for plum abuse or chartreuse. Think pink.
G'day, gorgeous. So I thought I might talk to you about career and what's one of the big things that we have to make sure that we consider about what's happening in our work environment and why maybe we might be having some issues at work. So let's talk about your passion for the things that you do. And often when you've become successful in a particular role, we have a tendency to kind of decide we're just going to sit pretty for a little bit, that you've worked really hard to get here and you're doing some really good stuff, but you want to not necessarily push yourself outside your comfort zone, that you've kind of got to the top of the heap and it was hard work getting there, so you just want to sit for a little bit, which is fair enough. But after a while, we can actually do ourselves a disservice. We can become quite stale in the role. And I find that if you don't have a continuous input of passion around the work that you do, that work becomes this drudgery. And it's not something that we wake up every day feeling awesome and ready to get to work. But in fact, we wake up every day dreading the idea of going into the office. Now, if you're in that situation, then I would encourage you to have a bit of a look through the career chapter in my book, Define Your Inner Diva, because I talk in there about the importance of passion and what it is that you need to do if you can't actually find that passion again in your working life. One of the reasons that we end up having problems in our midlife where, if there's a problem in the workplace, so say, for example, everything was going great in a project, but I don't know, something happens or you feel that, there was an issue at work and somehow you got the blame for it, or you felt that you were ostracized or disconnected in some way. One of the reasons that this has such a big impact on our sense of self is because a lot of us, because of the way that we grew up, we have a negative belief system about ourselves that when we get to adulthood, we just kind of go, I'm just going to be this. And when I am this thing, when I've achieved this pinnacle, whatever it is, that people will respect me and like me, and all of the stuff that I felt about myself in my adolescence won't matter anymore. Now, for a while, that kind of works. But usually after a few years, you start to get the feeling that actually you're a little bit of a fraud. If people really understood how you really felt about yourself, that they would kind of pull a pin and before you know it, you'd be out in your ear. And it's really important to understand why then, if anything happens in the work environment, we end up in a situation where we fall right back to all of our negative beliefs. Because the foundation on what we feel about ourselves positively is usually built on what we do, not who we are as people. And it's common, it's very common. In fact, most people do it in their lives because they don't like how they feel about themselves by the time they get to the end of their adolescence. That sort of 18 to 21 mark where you're kind of going, will I go to uni or not? What do I do with myself? What do I do with my life? And the problem is that when we go, I'm just going to be this thing, and then we get into it, we can probably be really successful at it, right? But at the end of the day, the career is just what you do. And a lot of us work really hard and throw ourselves into an awful lot of work trying to prove our worth to anybody who will stand still long enough to take notice. And we get really upset about the fact when people don't actually notice, because that's a lot of how we've defined how we feel about ourselves. And so it's at that point, if things aren't going well in the work environment, is often why we start to feel quite flat and low about our life in general. Sometimes too, in our careers, we go for a pinnacle or something, and then when we reach it, there's this kind of like, oh, is that it? Like this thing that seemed like the, Taj Mahal of achievements in terms of your career ends up being this pinnacle that you get there. And then it's kind of, when you get there, it's kind of like, now what? Because it kind of doesn't feel that great to be here. I still feel inside like I still need to do something else or something more. And so we always changing the goalpost for ourselves. We always want to, we've got to do something else, or something to say that, you know, we really have value. It's almost like we can never actually just get to the point where we accept that we're good at what we do, but it doesn't define who we are as people. Because it's when you can get down to understand who you are and actually resolve how you feel about who you are to the place that you can actually get full acceptance of yourself. It's then when you actually have that full acceptance of self that the stuff that you do in your career ends up being a really nice thing that you do, but it's not essential to define you. And so you're not sort of swung from one side to the other in terms of your career. You're actually more focused on your ability to be a great support, loyal, committed, a whole bunch of other wonderful things. And when you look in that mirror, you can actually kind of go, you know what? I really like who you are. I like myself. In fact, I love myself. I'm a good person. I can do good things for people, but I don't need other people to actually tell me that for me to feel good about me. I'm actually solid within myself and know that I'm a good person and I do good things. All right? Makes sense? Yeah, I think for a lot of you, you've nodded your way through. All right. So remember what I said. Go back to the chapter. Okay, that's the decisive diva chapter in Define Your Inner Diva, and it's all about your career. All right. I hope that was useful. See you soon.
Pink for cheeks and pink at your lips, pink for shirts and all of your slips, just a touch of pink at your knees, and if you please, what? Pink chemise.